What's up everyone, this is Andre from Indie Arts Midwest, and in this video we are going to jump over to the Unreal side and get our vehicle imported and up and running. As a disclaimer, I will not be including any information about how to set up the HUD. We're mainly focused on getting the vehicle moving around. With that said, let's begin. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new folder for our assets. We can now import our vehicle. Be sure to check skeletal mesh. And as far as the other settings go, you can leave those alone unless you happen to already have materials in there that you want to use. You could uncheck import materials or something like that. But for the most part, just leave it. Hit import all and we're good to go. And it gave me a few errors just based on the wheels not having UVs. That's okay. The first thing I would like to do is check over my materials. The main two that I'm concerned about is the chrome and the car paint. So I'm just going to do a quick edit of those just by adding a little roughness, specularity, and metallic to give it some shine and make it look good. So here the parameter color is brought in from the import. All I'm doing is then pressing the 1 key to bring up a numerical parameter that I can edit. Enter that into the metallic, specular, and roughness. I usually keep my metallic not exactly at 0, but close to when it comes to vehicles. I was planning on doing a speckled paint material for this car much later on, so that's why I don't want to go too crazy with the roughness. And these are the results. All right, I'm just going to do a quick save. And we can now check out this skeleton. As you can see, it is the body with all of the wheel bones parented to it, created by Unreal, which is great, saved us a lot of time. So let's go into the physics asset and begin editing. We will first select the body, go to primitive type, select box. Select regenerate bodies. I usually go into right side view so that I can do a little bit of scaling, whether that be to just move it up a little bit and if necessary widen it. Next we will select our top wheel and then hold shift to select the bottom one, which selects all of them. Go back to our primitive type and select sphere and regenerate. Now this portion is a very important step for your wheels because you're going to use the radius for each of them in this primitive section. I'm going to copy this radius here and you will use that in your wheel section. Now, if everything is properly scaled, then either all of your wheels will have the same radius or your front wheels will have a different radius than your rear wheels. I'm not entirely sure what affects that, but I have noticed that in this model in particular, all of my radiuses were different. So I had to basically settle for the average number or the higher number amongst the front and rear for the radius on my wheel settings. That won't always be the case for you, but just keep that in mind that you might see different radiuses based on how Unreal imported your asset in. So, and let's go ahead and create our first wheel blueprint, which I will name Corvega_front. Let's open it up. If you have properly scaled and placed all of your wheels within Blender, you shouldn't have to worry about messing with the offsets. However, you can use the offsets as a debug if you don't like a particular results, though there are times where I've messed around with the settings in Unreal and it's done absolutely nothing. So I'm not really sure why that's a thing, but it happens from time to time. We're going to define our wheel as front and then set the radius. So you see here, so we go back to the front wheel properties of the physics asset. Go back to our primitive array information. And Control C to copy that value. Go back to our wheel and Control V to paste it. The first thing that I like to do is set the suspension max raise and drop to 1 and 1, simply because this is just for testing, just to see how it looks, and you don't want to have any negative effects right away. And that's usually the issue that I've seen. So, and of course we want the front to be affected by steering. Beyond this point, many of these settings are up to you because it's based on the vehicle that you're setting up. So this is just the primary thing that I was focused on, in addition to establishing whether or not you want this to be a front or rear wheel vehicle. I'm choosing rear wheel in this case. So my affected by engine settings will be placed there. So let's duplicate and rename it to rear. And we just need to change a few things within this blueprint setup. Mainly that you're setting the axle type to rear and also changing your wheel radius. In this case, for the rear, since I'm using a rear wheel drive setup, I will have it affected by the handbrake and the engine. And also, let's not forget to set the wheel radius like I almost did. Right, so physics asset looks good, vehicle looks good, wheels are all set. Now we are ready to set up our animation blueprint. So right click, animation blueprint, and then select the skeleton that Unreal created for us. And give it a name, which I named Corvega Anim BP. And let's go ahead and open that up. For this section, we will only need 4 nodes. One has already been created for us by default. So we right click and we need a mesh space to ref pose. I misspelled it, so. We would then add a component to local. Next, we need to change the animation blueprint class type from anim instance to vehicle animation instance. This will allow us to acquire the wheel controller node. And the last thing to do is connect them all together. Before moving on to the main blueprint, I would like to add a action input for debugging, which I have selected as the P key. So with that done, we'll create our main blueprint. So right click and select Blueprint Class. And we need to go into the search for Vehicle Wheeled Pawn. And give it a custom name of your choice. So the first thing I do is add the animation blueprint, followed by the skeletal mesh. Zoom out a little bit. And this very important thing to check is simulate physics. Now, as I mentioned before, that I'm not going to be focusing on setting up the HUD, and my main goal is to get it moving around. So we're going to go over to the Advanced Vehicle Blueprint and copy just the movement section. That's all we'll need. So you can Control C, close that up, and get rid of these nodes here. Control V to paste it in, and there you go. Shouldn't be any errors that I can see. Compile just to test it out, and as you can see, compiled good. We can now add our debug. So I'll go ahead and look for it on the list here. There it is in the action events. And you'll want to add a flip-flop followed by a execute console command node. We're going to duplicate that a few times with Control D. Connect those up. And let's enter these commands. First one will be show collision. The second one will be view mode wireframe. And then the bottom one will take it back to the normal view, which is view mode lit. So when we press the P key, it'll show us different view modes so that we can debug back and forth between normal view and the physics view, which is what we really need to see what's going on with our wheels or our collision boxes on the chassis or body, whichever you want to call it, and just a better perspective on what's going on both views. So now we can move on to the wheels. And you'll have to be very careful about naming these exactly how they are in your skeleton. So if you need to use that as a reference, feel free to pull it up. And also we're going to set these as the front that we created for our wheel note or our wheel blueprints. We select our rear wheel blueprint for the Corvega underscore rear left, and do the same for the rear right. As you can see, I misspelled it there, but I did fix it eventually. I usually set the torque curve to whatever is default. It's not something I've messed around too much with, except for in the motorcycle. I did want to do something a little more exclusive with that. But just for a basic setup, yeah, I just left it at default. And beyond this point, the weight and the max torque and all that kind of stuff is pretty much up to you, based on the vehicle that you're trying to set up. If anything, I just wanted to alter the mass to be something a little more realistic. So that is something I would start with and just kind of go from there. But as I said, beyond this point, it's basically all you on how your vehicle is going to run. So that we can see our vehicle, we're going to add a spring arm and a camera. And I set the length a bit far away, so I gave it a higher value, just so I could be sure that I could see it. And then I offset the angle to give it that third person look. Compile, save, and we are ready to test it. Right after you watch me fix that error. Yep, there we go. And let's test. I wanted to start in debug mode so that we could actually see those wheels moving around properly. And let's view it in lit mode. Physics mode still activated. I moved the camera around so that I could get a side view. And as you can see, the wheels are passing through the floor a little bit. I'm not entirely sure why. I did go back into Blender and reset the wheels closer to the x-axis origin and exported, re-imported in Unreal, which is really easy to do, though it did crash, but it did import afterwards. And then still got the same results. So I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's, I figured maybe it was something to do with the offset, which I said that we could do to debug before. And I went in there, tried that out. Same results. So I did a lot of back and forth debugging on this before I essentially gave up on this particular model. Now I'm willing to go back in and try more, but to give you an example, take a look at the Chevy. It looks just fine. So I'm not entirely sure what the deal is in terms of why it's running this way, but um, it's more than likely just down to the vehicle. Every other one that I've had didn't have these kinds of issues. So if I had to guess, I could look at the maybe moving some things around in the physics asset, possibly. But either way, hopefully you didn't run into this issue. I believe that this came down to how the model is designed. I'm pretty sure that if I changed the wheels, then I would not have this issue at all. So I just kind of kept them basic to get through the tutorial. But I will more than likely post a debug vehicle or a debug video of all of my vehicles from side view, just to give you a little context on the differences in how they should not be sinking through the floor like that. But either way, this is how you get a vehicle up and running. I hope that you found this video helpful, and the process isn't too lengthy once you get it down. As I said in the Blender video, you can repeat this process for every one of your vehicles. It will even get easier if you just duplicate stuff as well. So just keep that in mind. It's always good to have a reference file floating around. And yeah, I think that's about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.